What's up guys, Mad Max here, and today I have a new to me electric toy. A Super73 R. And I know what you're thinking, well, you already have a Talaria Sting. I do, but I wanted to try out something that had some pedals on it. And today I'm not really going to talk about how this bike rides or anything. What I'm going to talk about is one big upgrade that I feel that every one of these e-bikes should have, and that is a headlight kit. So, stay tuned and I'll show you how I install this on that. Okay, so to start off with, this is a Super73 R. Not an R Brooklyn, not an RX, just a regular R. And what I noticed was it has a spare plug right here. So, I called Super73 and I asked them, hey, do you guys sell a plug-and-play light kit? No, we do not. So, I asked them, what are these plugs for if they are not for a light kit? And you can see this one is the same thing, just a female version back here. Well, I was told they're not for anything. So they put plugs on. They apparently put them on for future accessories and then decided, we're not going to put accessories on that are powered up. So the bike has these vestigial plugs, and I'm going to wire the lights to these. Now, the first thing I want to note is that I got 48 volts back here. I did not get 48 volts on the front plug. Now you're saying, Max, lights typically run on 12 volts. Well, that's why we have this. This is what they call a DC to DC converter. And this one in particular will convert 48 volts down to 12, which is exactly what we need. Now this 12 volt adapter will power up lights that I got from Loomenade. Loomenade. Took me a while to figure that one out. Now I will tell you that their packaging is spectacular. If you notice, they have QR codes everywhere. They gave me some Skittles, which I can always take a bribe of candy there, even though I did pay for this. I have an adapter here that is a splitter. I will be using this to power up the lights, because it was cheaper actually to buy this than to buy two connectors. Then we have brackets, nicely packaged right here. And we have the light switch right here. So let me unpack this, lay it all out, and show you what it looks like. Okay, so I have this all laid out. We have the tail light here. We have the splitter that I'm going to end up cutting apart. We have a beautifully made billet mount for a switch. I guess that's for your low and high beam. We have the headlight, and I did the optional billet mounts. Alright, so I'm going to start off with the switch, then I'm going to put on the headlight mounts. I'm going to look at the guides and see how exactly they want everything bolted up. And then I will start with the wiring, which is going to require taking the seat off that and probing around under there. Alright, so step one complete, mounting the switch. There are two screws at the top you take out, you unscrew them, screw it all back together, make sure it's clamped on the bar nice. Set it at an angle that's comfortable for you, which I already did. And you are complete. The pigtail we are going to take care of later. Okay, so next on my list of things to do is I'm putting on the headlight brackets. I have the right side one in my hand right now. You can see because the screws will face towards the outside. Take these little screws here and here out. This clamp will open up, and then bolt it onto the fork like so. I did put blue Loctite on the screws, mostly because I was a little nervous with vibration, but electric bikes don't have a ton of vibration, so I'm going to call it optional. The reason why you don't put these on tight yet is because you want to bolt the headlight to the brackets and then line everything up, then tighten everything down so you're not struggling with a bracket that's maybe a couple millimeters high or low. So let me put the camera down. I'll bolt on this side, and then we'll move on to bolting on the physical headlight. Okay, so next step is you put these little side bolts on to bolt the headlight to the brackets. Now, as I said, reason why you leave this loose is so that you can adjust this headlight left-right, and also up, down. Now, in this particular location, I feel like it should go a bit up. It does stick out kind of far, but that's fine. So I'm going to bring this up a bit and then tighten it down. Okay, once you have your headlight in a spot that looks good, tighten down all of the screws, which include the 2 here and then the 2 here. They have nuts on the end here, so just grab them with a little wrench or a pair of pliers, tighten them up, and make sure these are tight. You're going to have to adjust this up and down at night to line up the beam, but that's for later. The next thing we need to do is plug this into the wiring harness on the back of this. Now, as you can see, the headlight has 2 plugs on it. The switch has 1. The switch is only going to plug into one of these. The other one is for power, which is this guy right here. So, let's plug our headlight switch in, and then we will worry about running some power to this thing. Okay, now that the headlight is mounted, it's time to mount the taillight. And I'm a little disappointed by this because they didn't include anything to hold the taillight. And for 40 bucks, I kind of feel like you should have something that holds the taillight. But what you do is, you line this up, you double side tape it on, and then you use the zip ties to hold it in place while the adhesive cures. You also want to wipe this down with like isopropyl alcohol or something, just to make sure that this has the best chance to stick to that it possibly can. You can eyeball this, you could measure it, but I'm going to end up eyeballing it. Yeah, so let me clean this thing up and slap this on. Alright, so taillight's mounted up. I have the zip ties on there. If I feel comfortable pulling them off in a day or two, I will. I think that they are probably going to stay on here semi-permanently to permanently, though. It's just, you know, I just don't really trust double-sided tape. But it is what it is. You can always put more on, or you can figure out how else to strap this thing on. But for now, thing's stuck on. I ran the wire under here and then back around, and then this will go under the seat to our DC to DC converter. Speaking of which, it's time to take the seat off, which requires taking this under tray under here off, which is held in with a few screws and a zip tie up front, and then we'll take the seat off so that we can access the motor controller area and get to a 48-volt power source. Okay, now that we have this little tray dropped out from underneath, I did not cut the zip tie up there yet. I might wait on that, but to get the seat out, there is that screw right there, that screw right there, and then there is one all the way up front. I don't know if we can see it, but it's up in here, and that should remove the seat. So, now it's time to pull the seat and get to all the electronics. Okay, now that the seat is off, if you take out those 4 screws, the motor controller right here will come right out. And you can see there's a couple connectors there, and you can see the zip tie right there. So I'm going to cut that as well. Take these 4 screws out, and then drop this down so we can look at the wiring that we got. Okay, so I have officially crossed the point of no return. The green 5-pin connector here, I cut it off because I could not get this connector in time to shoot this video. So, I cut it off. I have already tested and made sure that I can get 48 volts out of 2 wires on here. However, I don't know what goes to what, so I cut them off. I'm going to strip it back so I can get to each one and test them and figure out which wire gives me 48 volts. Once I do that, I will tell you what wire colors they are. Alright, so I'm sorry you're looking at my multimeter upside down. I taped it on so you could see it, but I tested out the wires and I found that black and white gave me the best voltage. Now, as you can see, I just powered it off and it might be draining still. Yeah, it's still draining. Now, it's negative because I have the wires flipped, but you see it's going 3, and it'll drop down to 0 eventually. There you go, 2.9. So it eventually drops down to 0. Now, if I power the bike up, sorry for the wait here. There we go. Let me put on the wires correctly here. Black and white. Give me 52 volts right now, which is what a 48 volt battery should put out when fully charged. And this battery is more than 3/4 full. Now, if I turn it off, I just turn it off, and I'll test it again, and you'll see it's at like 6, and then it'll start dropping. Now, with a DC to DC converter, because there will be some sort of draw, this will drop down to 0 by itself. It's not going to provide any kind of draw on the battery once it's off. So, now that we know it's black and white, now we can hook up our DC to DC converter to that. Okay, so I wired the white and black wire to a 2-pin connector. I put a 2-pin connector on my DC to DC converter on the input side, and I now get, when I plug it in and the bike is on, I get 12.5 volts out of this yellow and black wire, which is perfect because that's what we need in order to power up the headlight and taillight. So, next up, now I have to figure out a mounting solution for this and run wires to this. So, let me get started on that and figure it all out. However, before I mount this, I want to attach my connectors here. Now, as you probably noticed, this started off as a Y connector. You can see it right there. I ended up cutting one end off because I have to extend it to reach the front, and we're going to run that through the frame. So what I'm going to do is, I am going to extend this wire here, just this one extension here. The red and the black are what powers it up. And the other end, I'm going to end up soldering to the DC to DC converter. So I'm going to go inside, solder that up so that I have a nice extension. I'm going to say that you probably need about, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 feet to go stem to stern here, actually. Let's measure it. Okay, well, 2.5 feet sounds good to me. Yeah, so about 2.5 feet, probably 4 or 6 inches of extension on there anyway to begin with, but, you know, better to have too much than too little. So, I am going to attach an extension onto this Y splitter here, and then I'm going to solder it to that, and then we will test it out, mount it all up, put it back together, and then I'll have working lights without a separate battery on a Super73 R that was never intended to have lights that work without a battery. Okay, moment of truth. Will this work? I just have the wiring draped in here because we want to make sure it works before anything else. Got my DC to DC inverter, have it plugged in, have it plugged into the rear light, and have that wire run into the front light. So, turn it on, and I have a brake light. My Super73 thing is firing up. I have a DRL. I have a high beam, which is super duper bright, and a low beam, which is also nice and bright, which I will have to re-aim because, like I said, kind of have to play with this at night to get the aim right. That is way higher than it should be, but we'll fix that in due time at night. The big thing is this wiring works, which is awesome because now it means I don't have to put a separate battery on to power up these lights. So let me unplug everything and start running some wiring. Okay, so 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I ended up having to unbolt the controller so that I could unplug those wires there. You gotta yank out that grommet so that you can run this wire forward. I also yanked out this grommet to aid me, and then it's gonna come out of this grommet here. Hopefully everything runs smoothly. So, let me start running some wiring. Make sure you run it through this first grommet right here before you start, otherwise you're gonna be a pretty unhappy person. So make sure you run it through this grommet first, and then you're going to run it out that grommet at the end. If you screw up on this end, not that big a deal, you just unplug and try again, but if you screw up on this end, you got to run it all over again. So, got the wire sitting right here, and time to run it. Okay, so I ended up zip tying the DC to DC converter up in there. I actually loosened the motor controller so I could wrap a zip tie around it, and then I zip tied the various wires and got it pretty tight. And I'm gonna put the seat back on and then the cover on there, and it should look pretty OEM. Alright guys, Future Max here. Even though I'm still wearing the same shirt, I swear I showered and washed this shirt since I shot that video. So I've had the lights on the 73 for a week or so, and they work awesome. Loomenade makes a fantastic product. I really like how the products were packaged. I just wish that the Super 73 Rs had a plug-and-play solution so you didn't have to add an auxiliary battery, but that DC to DC converter worked out perfect. So let me give you guys a couple shots of this 73 now that it's got some cool lights on it. Alright guys, so that is it in terms of wiring up the Loomenade lights. This will really work on any kind of light that you want to hardwire onto your Super 73 R or any other Super 73 that does not have a 12 volt output but does have a 48 volt output. Just find 48 volts, put a DC to DC converter on, and you're good to go. No more dealing with spare battery packs and having to wire that stuff up. Just get rid of it, put the DC to DC converter on, you'll be much happier. Anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this was helpful. See you later.